Mission: make a gingerbread house out of cake and buttercream only. Gingerbread houses can take forever to make, and lining up gingerbread walls is tricky. Using cake and buttercream is much easier, less fiddly, and spoiler alert, the end result is delicious. You can make this cake with minimal tools. You'll need a rectangular pan to make 3 cakes. These are my perfect chocolate cakes, and they're 9 by 13 inches. Wrap them in cling film or plastic wrap, and refrigerate them for an hour so they're easier to work with. Meanwhile, choose a cardboard cake board at least as big as your cakes. These are 1 inch wider than mine, 10 by 14 inches, and you'll need 2 of them. On the first one, measure out your cake and divide it in half along the longest side, so you have 2 identical rectangles, each one half the size of your cake. Cut these out, and these will be the cake boards for the house and the roof of your cake. I'll explain why they're really important in a minute. Unwrap 2 of your cakes and use a serrated knife, like a bread knife, to cut them both in half along the longest side to make 2 identical rectangles, just like on the cake board you just cut out, and you'll have 4 of these half cakes in total, which will make up the body of the house. For the third cake, cut it in half, and then cut one of those in half again, and cut half of that into 2 pieces, one a bit bigger than the other. These pieces will all be for the roof. Prepare your filling and icing or frosting. I'm using my 4-minute buttercream, stirring in some melted chocolate chips to make a really rich and creamy chocolate buttercream, which goes really well with my perfect chocolate cake. You'll find all of my recipes on britishgirlbakes.com. The easiest way to fill your cake is with a piping bag, without a nozzle or tip, because piping is much quicker and neater than spreading. First, use a dot of buttercream in the middle of each of your cake boards to attach the first layer of cake, which will be one of the halves you cut out of the 3 rectangular cakes. Let's build the body of the house first. Pipe a border of filling around the cake, fill that with some zigzags, and spread it around to completely cover the top of the cake. Lower another half of cake down on top, adjusting it so it's directly on top of the cake layer below, which will give your house straight sides. Another layer of filling, another layer of cake, filling, and then a 4th half of cake on top. Trim down each side to take off any pieces that are sticking out to leave 4 flat sides around the cake. If your cake layers are still cold, you can ice or frost them straight away. I'm using a round cake board underneath this cake for now, so that the buttercream doesn't get all over my turntable. This cake board's a bit too small. One as big as your turntable would be ideal. Spread the buttercream all over the top and sides of the cake. Push it over the side edges so that it sticks out, and that way when you smooth it, you'll make nice sharp edges or corners. Put this into the fridge while you finish building the roof. Pipe filling along the middle of the first cake layer and put the next biggest piece of cake on that. More filling, and then the smallest or narrowest piece of cake. For the final piece, cut it in half but slice diagonally downwards to make 2 triangles. Pipe or spread some buttercream along each of the sides of the middle layer of cake and along the cake just below that, and this buttercream will stick on the triangular wedges of cake to make a slanted roof. You'll need to trim the rest of the cake to make a smooth straight slope going down on each side of the roof. Trim the other sides of the roof too so that they go straight down with none of the cake layers sticking out. This doesn't have to be perfect because next you'll cover it with buttercream to fill in any imperfections. This first layer of buttercream is called a crumb coat, and it traps any crumbs that come off the cake so that they don't get into your next, final layer of buttercream. It doesn't need to be perfectly smooth and pretty, it just needs to cover up all of the cake so there's no cake and no crumbs visible. Put this into the fridge and take out the bottom part of the house. It's time to add some support to the house so that it can hold up the roof. I like to use these boba straws, which are thicker and wider than normal straws, but wooden dowels work really well too. Push a straw or dowel into the middle of the cake, pushing down until it hits the cake board at the bottom. Pinch it where it sticks out above the cake, pull it up, and cut it where you pinched it. Hold this straw or dowel against 4 more, cutting each one to be the same height. Then push the middle one back in and push the other 4 in a square, spaced evenly around the cake. These supports will hold up the cake board that the roof is sitting on, so that the roof cake doesn't sink down into this bottom cake. That's the reason for building the roof on a cake board. Without it, the roof cake would sink straight down onto these supports and crush the cake below. Spread some more buttercream on top of this cake to act as glue to attach the roof, so it sticks. You can touch the sides to balance or adjust it because it's been in the fridge, so the buttercream is cold and firm, and you won't damage it. Now, wherever you want to put windows, spread some more buttercream and scrape off the excess to leave a smooth layer, which will look prettier through the windows than the crumbly layer of buttercream underneath. If there are any gaps in between the two cakes, use a bit more buttercream to fill those in. Draw a window onto a piece of parchment or wax paper or baking paper. Fold the paper in half a few times and cut around the first window to make as many as you need. I'm using 5 for my cake. Very important, cut a slit in the middle of each window, and I'll show you why in a moment. Press the paper windows onto the smooth buttercream patches on the cake, and although the buttercream will have set against the cold cake, so it will be firm, not sticky, some condensation will have formed after taking the cake out of the cold fridge and moving it to room temperature. So if you press the paper gently against the buttercream, it will attach to those condensation droplets. You can measure the height of the windows if you want to make sure they're all positioned evenly. I'm making a pale pink gingerbread house because why not? You can use orange food colouring with chocolate buttercream to make a gingerbread colour if you prefer. Spread or pipe the buttercream over each side of the cake, scraping over it with a cake comb. Spread more buttercream over any indents or air pockets and scrape again until it's smooth. Then use a toothpick to peel the paper windows off, sliding the toothpick into the slit in the window and pulling outwards slowly. This is the reason you cut those slits in the middle of each paper window. The edges of the windows will have some texture because the final layer of frosting is fairly thick, but we'll cover up the edges soon. Square cakes are much trickier to frost than round cakes because of all of the angles around the sides, and to make those angles sharp, spread buttercream all the way over each edge so it sticks out. And that way your cake scraper will slice through the extra buttercream around each corner, leaving a 90-degree angle instead of a curved or rounded edge. After smoothing all of the sides and peeling off all of the paper windows, spread the buttercream at the top edge of the cake onto the roof, and then put this cake into the fridge to chill before the next step. While it's in the fridge, make some Christmas trees. To make a soft green, use a drop of orange to tone it down, like this, so it's not bright green. Put this into a piping bag fitted with a medium round tip. This is a number 8. Or you can use a sandwich bag with one of the bottom corners cut off to pipe through instead. You'll need 2 ice cream cones and use your green buttercream to cover them in little dots. These will be easier to move after the buttercream sets, which is why it's a good idea to make these now before finishing the rest of the house. Now that the gingerbread house cake is cold and the buttercream is firm, you can add the rest of the details. Use a ruler to measure up the sides of the cake for some wood panelling. I'm marking every 2 centimeters onto mine. Then push the edge of the ruler into the buttercream to score a line across it. You can use the edge of your cake comb instead if you like. You can use a paintbrush to brush off any buttercream crumbs that come off while you're doing this. Do this on all of the sides of the cake except the sloping sides of the roof. For the door, I'm using one of the windows as a guide to make an arched door, a bit taller and wider than the windows. Cut it out and use the paper around it as a stencil, pressing it against the cake and then spread buttercream over it to fill in the door shape. Smooth the buttercream with a palette knife or offset spatula, and then peel the parchment off to leave the door shape behind. We're going to cover up the edges of this too, so they don't need to be perfectly neat and smooth. Press a cookie cutter, or any round object, above the door, and a smaller circle, like the base of a piping tip, within the big circle, to make a wreath. Pipe green dots to fill that in, just like you did for the Christmas tree cones. We'll add baubles or ornaments to this later. For the roof, use a large round piping tip, like a 1A, to pipe dots of buttercream along the bottom edge, and then press the tip of a spatula into each dot, and drag upwards to make scallops. Pipe another row of dots above this, with each dot in between the 2 dots below it, so that they're offset. Don't worry about the first and final scallop lining up with the edge of the roof, because we'll even all of that out later. If in doubt, add an extra scallop so that it sticks out over the edge, rather than finishing the last dot a bit before the edge. Go all the way up to the top of the roof on both sides of the house. Now let's add details to the windows and door. Use a toothpick to make a cross in each window as a guide to pipe along. This is a small number 4 round tip. As I squeeze the piping bag, the buttercream bulges out to make a dot, and as I stop squeezing, I pull the bag away to leave a little peak on each dot, which the next dot will overlap. If the buttercream roof hasn't set yet, put the cake back into the fridge for another 30 minutes, and then use a sharp knife to slice along the edge of the roof scallops so that there's a flat edge. Use a round or star-shaped piping tip, like this number 18 tip, to pipe along the edge, using the same technique as for the windows. Squeezing the piping bag to let the buttercream bulge out, and then pulling away as you stop squeezing the bag, to leave a peak or tail, which you pipe over with the next one. Continue down from the edge of the roof, along the edge of the bottom of the house, all around the cake. For the top of the roof, you can use the same technique, or pipe little spiral swirls, where you start in the middle and pipe a ring spiraling outwards, and then drag that across. Pull away and repeat, but piping in the opposite direction. So clockwise first, and then anti-clockwise or counterclockwise for the next one. I'm piping 2 lines of these to cover up the join of the scallops along the top edge of the roof. I'm also piping along the bottom edge of the scallops, so that they match the other edges of the cake, and also because the piping looks a bit like snow or icicles hanging down from the roof. Now, to decorate the wreath, I'm piping dots wherever I want to place a bauble or ornament, and then pressing a sprinkle into each of those dots. I have to do this because the buttercream wreath has already set, so sprinkles won't stick to it anymore. But if you decide earlier than I did that you want to add sprinkles, I suggest adding them straight after piping the wreath, so that they'll stick and you can skip the step of these extra dots. The door has set too, so I'm piping a dot to attach another sprinkle as a doorknob, and piping the same border around the door as I did for the edges of the cake, and also around the windows too. Adding some more piping here, and here, and here, and here, and here. Before adding the finishing touches, move your cake onto the final cake board, which is the other rectangular cake board. Use 2 dots of buttercream to attach the house, which is still on that little rectangular piece of cardboard you cut out at the beginning, which makes it easy to lift and move without breaking. Use a cake lifter or spatula to center the cake on the board, and then pipe some white buttercream around the bottom edge of the house. To make buttercream this white, mix it for several minutes to lighten it, and then add a tiny, tiny drop of violet color, which takes away the yellow tinge of buttercream. Spread buttercream all around the cake to cover the board, and then press cling film or saran wrap down onto it to smooth and flatten it, and then lift it up to leave some snowy texture in the buttercream. Pick up your Christmas trees and press them into the buttercream snow in front of the gingerbread house. You can decorate these with sprinkles too if you like. You can buy a sprinkle mix to match the color scheme of your cake, or I'm picking round sprinkles out of various mixes, choosing the colors that I want to use from each one. Final details. Use a powder brush to dust the cake and snow with tinker dust or edible glitter to make it sparkly. Don't brush straight onto the cake because you'll leave big clumps of glitter, so instead, tap the brush against your finger very close to the cake, and the glitter will fall down and stick to the cake on the way. Another nice finishing touch is to wrap a fabric ribbon around the cake board to add some colour and to cover up the corrugated cardboard edge of the board. To serve a tall cake like this is surprisingly very simple. Just cut from the top down until you feel your knife hit the cake board in the middle. Serve those slices, lift up the cake board underneath and pull out the supports, and then serve the bottom part of the cake. Yum! This gingerbread house is not only stunning, it's also absolutely delicious, with moist chocolate cake layers and rich buttercream filling and frosting. You'll find the step-by-step instructions for this tutorial on BritishGirlBakes.com, along with lots of photos, and you'll also find my online cake school on BritishGirlBakes.com, where you'll learn hundreds of cake decorating techniques and designs. Thanks for watching!